A new driving law just went into effect in January 2026 that could cost you your license in under 60 seconds. And if you're like most drivers on American roads right now, you have absolutely no idea it even exists. In fact, law number 3 on the list I'm about to break down has already caught thousands of drivers completely off guard, and the fines start at $500 before you even understand what you did wrong. 10 major driving laws changed across the United States starting in January 2026, and some states are enforcing them so aggressively that it's obvious this is about revenue generation as much as it is about safety. We're talking about laws that affect how you use your phone, where you can park, how fast you can drive in certain zones, what lane you can travel in on the highway, and even what you can hang from your rearview mirror or mount on your dashboard. Some of these changes are so specific and so counterintuitive that even experienced drivers with clean records are getting pulled over without knowing they violated anything. And here's what should make you angry. Most of these laws were passed quietly, with minimal public awareness campaigns, which means cities and states are counting on you not knowing, so they can collect fines from people who aren't actually dangerous drivers. Just uninformed citizens trying to get to work. Hit that subscribe button right now because 90% of drivers miss critical law changes exactly like these. And I don't want you to be one of them opening an envelope 2 weeks from now with a ticket you didn't see coming. Drop a like if you're tired of being nickel and dimed by laws that seem designed more to generate revenue than to actually make roads safer. And comment below with your state, because enforcement of these laws varies wildly depending on where you live, and this community needs to know what's happening on the ground in different jurisdictions. These updates could hit your wallet hard, put points on your license that spike your insurance rates, or in the worst cases, get your license suspended entirely. This is happening right now, today, in 2026, and most people are driving around completely oblivious to the fact that the rules fundamentally changed. Let's start with the first major change that's affecting the most people across the most states, and it's one you probably think you already understand but actually don't. Hands-free device laws just got drastically stricter, and the enforcement is relentless. You might think you know the rules about phone use while driving, but listen closely because what was acceptable even 6 months ago will now get you ticketed. In 2026, 38 states now enforce a complete hands-free policy, which means you cannot touch your phone for any reason while you're operating a vehicle. Not at a red light, not in stop-and-go traffic, not even to change your music or check your GPS. If a police officer sees your hand on that phone, even if you're completely stopped at a red light with your foot on the brake, you're getting a ticket. The fines range from $250 to $1,000 depending on which state you're in, and yes, it goes on your driving record, which means your insurance company will find out and your rates will increase. Here's what most people are getting catastrophically wrong about this law, and it's costing them hundreds of dollars. They think hands-free means you can still hold your phone as long as you're using voice commands or Siri or Google Assistant. Wrong. Completely wrong. The phone has to be mounted in a holder or sitting somewhere you are not physically touching it. Your lap doesn't count as hands-free. Your hand doesn't count even if you're using voice control. The device needs to be in a proper mount attached to your dashboard or windshield, or it needs to be connected to your car's Bluetooth system where you're controlling it exclusively through your steering wheel controls or voice commands without ever touching the phone itself. And police officers are being trained specifically to watch for this violation because it's easy to spot and it generates consistent revenue for municipalities. Think about how many times you've picked up your phone at a red light just to skip a song or check a text notification. Every single one of those instances is now a ticketable offense in 38 states. But here's the second change that's catching even more people, and it's generating millions of dollars in ticket revenue while hiding behind the justification of child safety. School zone speed cameras are now active 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year in 22 states. Read that again. 24/7, year-round. It used to be that school zone cameras only operated during school hours on school days, which made logical sense. But now in 2026, those cameras run constantly. That means even on weekends, even during summer break when school isn't in session, even at midnight when no children are anywhere near the area. If you speed through a school zone, that camera is photographing your license plate and you're getting a ticket in the mail 2 weeks later. The official reasoning behind this law is that school zones are often located in residential areas where children play after school hours and on weekends, so the lower speed limits should apply all the time. But here's the part that nobody's talking about openly, the part that reveals what this is really about. These tickets stack up devastatingly fast, and there's no human discretion involved. If you drive through the same school zone 5 days a week on your way to work and you're going even 5 miles over the reduced speed limit, not the regular road speed limit, but the school zone limit that most people forget applies at midnight on a Saturday now, you could receive 5 separate tickets before you even realize what's happening. Each ticket costs between $150 and $300 depending on your state. Do the math. That's up to $1,500 in fines before you open your first envelope, because all the tickets arrive at once after processing delays. This isn't about safety at 3 in the morning on a Sunday. This is about revenue generation, and it's working exactly as designed. Cities are making millions of dollars from drivers who committed no meaningful safety violation, but who didn't realize the enforcement hours changed. Now we get to law number 3, and this is the one catching the most people completely by surprise because it feels fundamentally counterintuitive to how most Americans have been driving their entire lives. Left lane laws are now being enforced with heavy penalties in 31 states, and we're not talking about warnings or friendly reminders. We're talking about $200 to $500 fines plus points on your license in some jurisdictions. You've probably heard people say that the left lane is for passing only, but most states, historically, didn't actually enforce that rule with any consistency. Well, that just changed dramatically in 2026, and police officers are actively targeting this behavior. If you're cruising in the left lane on a highway and you're not actively passing another vehicle, you can be pulled over and cited. Here's a real-world example of how this plays out and why it's shocking so many drivers. Imagine you're on the highway, traffic is relatively light, and you're comfortably sitting in the left lane traveling at the speed limit. You're not speeding, you're not weaving, you're not tailgating. You think you're driving perfectly legally. Wrong. A police officer can pull you over and issue a citation because you're impeding the flow of traffic, even if you're traveling at the posted speed limit. The law now says explicitly in 31 states that the left lane is for passing, period. Once you complete a pass, you are legally required to move back to the right lane. If you don't, you're violating traffic law. This shocks people because it feels completely counterintuitive. How can you be doing something wrong when you're obeying the speed limit? But the law is clear now, and enforcement is aggressive because studies show that left lane camping actually causes more accidents than speeding does. Faster drivers get stuck behind left lane campers, they get frustrated, they make dangerous passes on the right, and accidents happen. So states are cracking down hard, and drivers who have been using the left lane as their default cruising lane for decades are getting expensive tickets that they never saw coming. But if you think that's the only new restriction on where you can drive and when, you need to hear about what's happening at intersections in 40 major cities across America right now. Right turn on red restrictions are expanding at a pace that's outstripping any public awareness campaign, and the inconsistency in signage is setting drivers up for failure. You might think, as most Americans have thought for 50 years, that you can always turn right on red unless there's a specific sign prohibiting it. Not anymore. In 2026, over 40 major cities, including New York, Los Angeles, Seattle, and Chicago, have implemented blanket bans on right turns on red in their downtown areas and high pedestrian zones. The official reasoning is pedestrian safety, and there is legitimate data showing that right turns on red account for a significant percentage of pedestrian accidents in urban areas. But here's the implementation problem that's costing drivers money. In many of these zones, even if there's no sign specifically saying no turn on red, the default rule is that you cannot turn. You have to wait for the green light. How are you supposed to know if you're in one of these zones? Great question, and the answer reveals the scam. Most cities are supposed to have clear signage at the entry points to these downtown restriction zones, but the rollout has been inconsistent at best and deliberately confusing at worst. Some intersections have signs, others don't. Some have small signs that are easy to miss. Others have no indication at all that the rule changed. Your best bet as a driver is to assume that in any busy downtown area or near schools and hospitals, right turn on red is prohibited unless you see a sign specifically permitting it. But that's a complete reversal of how this rule has worked in America for decades, and most drivers haven't adjusted their thinking yet. The fines for this violation range from $100 to $400, and because cameras are catching most of these infractions, you won't even know you got a ticket until it shows up in your mail 2 weeks later. No warning, no officer discretion. Just a photograph of your car turning right on red in a zone where you didn't know the rules changed, and a bill for $300. And while we're discussing pedestrian safety laws, there's another change that represents a massive cultural shift in how Americans think about crosswalks and right-of-way. Pedestrian right-of-way laws are now zero tolerance in 28 states. And the enforcement is creating situations where drivers are getting ticketed for behavior that used to be considered normal courtesy. Starting in January 2026, these 28 states adopted laws giving pedestrians absolute right-of-way in all crosswalks, whether they're marked with paint or unmarked. Here's what that means in practical terms. If a pedestrian is anywhere near a crosswalk, and I mean anywhere, including just standing on the curb looking like they might cross, you are legally required to stop completely and allow them to cross. You cannot wave them through. You cannot inch forward to indicate you want to go first. You have to come to a complete stop. If you don't, and a police officer sees it, you're getting a ticket that starts at $300. But here's where it gets even more aggressive. In some states, if you fail to yield to a pedestrian and the incident is caught on camera or reported by a witness, because yes, witnesses can now report this violation, you can face points on your license and even mandatory traffic school attendance. The law is designed to protect pedestrians, especially in urban areas where crosswalk accidents have been rising. But for drivers, it means you need to be hyper-aware and extremely cautious at every single intersection, even ones where pedestrians rarely cross. And if you're wondering whether I think this is reasonable or whether I think this goes too far, that's not the point. The point is that the law changed, enforcement is active, and most drivers don't know, which means they're getting expensive tickets for behavior they didn't realize was illegal. Subscribe to this channel right now if you want to stay ahead of law changes like this instead of learning about them from a ticket in your mailbox. Drop a comment below telling me if any of these laws have already caught you or someone you know, because this community needs to share information about what's actually being enforced on the ground. And if you haven't hit that like button yet, do it now, because this kind of detailed breakdown of new laws is exactly what you're not getting from mainstream sources that just repeat press releases without explaining real-world impact. Now, here's a law that's going to shock you if you've ever pulled into a bike lane for even 30 seconds to drop someone off or run into a store quickly. Parking in bike lanes is now a towable offense in 19 states and dozens of cities, which means this isn't just about getting a ticket anymore. They can immediately tow your vehicle, and the costs add up devastatingly fast. As of 2026, if you block a bike lane even momentarily, you risk getting a citation that ranges from $150 to $500, plus towing fees that add another $300 to $600, plus impound fees if you don't retrieve your car quickly enough. We're talking about a potential $1,000 mistake for stopping in a bike lane for 30 seconds. The push for this law came from cycling advocacy groups who argued, with some legitimate data to support them, that blocked bike lanes force cyclists into traffic lanes, creating genuinely dangerous situations. So the law changed to make bike lanes completely off-limits for any vehicle stopping for any reason at any time. If you need to stop quickly to let someone out or to load something, you have to find an actual parking spot or a designated loading zone. Bike lanes are treated the same as fire hydrant zones now, absolute no stopping zones with immediate tow authority. And enforcement is aggressive in cities with active cycling communities because those advocacy groups are watching and reporting violations. This is a perfect example of a law that sounds reasonable in theory, but that catches regular people who aren't trying to cause problems and who just need to stop for a moment. But the law doesn't care about your intent or your urgency. Block a bike lane, lose your car, pay $1,000. And while we're on the subject of laws that seem designed to catch people doing normal things, here's one that most drivers don't even know exists, but that's being enforced in 15 states. Idling time limits are now being actively enforced in residential areas, and if you're someone who likes to warm up your car in the winter or cool it down in the summer before getting in, you need to hear this. In 2026, 15 states have laws limiting how long you can leave your car idling while parked in a residential area. We're talking about sitting in your driveway or on the street with your engine running. The limit varies by state, but it's usually between 3 and 5 minutes. After that, if a neighbor complains or if a police officer happens to drive by, you can be fined between $50 and $250. The official reasoning is environmental. Idling cars produce emissions, and in residential neighborhoods, that affects air quality. There's also a noise pollution argument. So if you're someone who starts your car and lets it run for 10 or 15 minutes while you finish getting ready in the morning, especially in winter when you want the interior to warm up, you might want to rethink that habit. Some states have exceptions for extreme weather conditions, but you need to verify what your specific state allows. This law is mostly complaint-driven, meaning police aren't actively patrolling neighborhoods looking for idling cars. But if a neighbor reports you, and people absolutely do report this, officers will respond and issue citations. It's another example of a law that sounds good in a legislative hearing, but that criminalizes normal behavior that millions of Americans engage in without thinking twice. Here's one that's going to frustrate anyone who installed a dashboard camera for safety and documentation purposes. Dashboard camera regulations are getting complicated in 7 states, and what was considered a smart safety precaution is now potentially a ticketable offense if you mount it in the wrong location. You might assume that having a dash cam is always a good idea, and in most cases, it still is. But in 2026, 7 states introduced specific laws regulating where and how you can mount a dashboard camera in your vehicle. The stated concern is that dash cams mounted in certain positions can obstruct the driver's view, which creates a safety hazard. In these states, your dash cam has to be mounted in a very specific zone, usually directly behind your rearview mirror and not extending more than a few inches into the windshield viewing area. If your dash cam is mounted outside this designated zone, say in the corner of your windshield where it doesn't block your mirror but where it's easier to access, you can be ticketed for obstructed view, which carries a fine of $75 to $200. Before you mount a dash cam, or if you already have one mounted, you need to check your specific state's regulations. Most dash cam manufacturers now provide guidelines for legal mounting positions, but those guidelines are based on the strictest state laws, which means your mount might be legal in your state, but positioned in a way that reduces the camera's effectiveness. This is regulation for the sake of regulation, creating a problem that didn't exist and turning a safety device into a potential violation. But you still need to comply, because police officers are being trained to look for this during traffic stops, and it's an easy additional citation to add if they've already pulled you over for something else. Now, here's a law expansion that actually makes sense from a safety perspective, but that's catching drivers who aren't adjusting their behavior to the broader application. Emergency vehicle move-over laws now include all roadside vehicles in 33 states, not just police cars and ambulances. You probably already know about the move-over law that's been in effect for years. If you see emergency vehicles with flashing lights on the side of the road, you're supposed to move over a lane if possible, or slow down significantly if you can't move over. That law was designed to protect police officers, paramedics, and firefighters who were getting hit by passing traffic while responding to emergencies. In 2026, 33 states expanded this law to include all vehicles stopped on the roadside with hazard lights activated. That means tow trucks, maintenance vehicles, construction crews, and even regular passenger cars broken down on the shoulder with their hazards flashing. If you don't move over to give them space, or if you can't move over and you don't slow down significantly, you can be cited for violating the move over law. The fines are substantial, often starting at several $100s, because the violation is categorized as a serious safety issue. This expansion makes sense because tow truck drivers and roadside assistance workers have been killed by passing vehicles at alarming rates, but most drivers haven't adjusted their behavior yet because they don't realize the law changed from just emergency vehicles to all roadside vehicles. You need to start treating every car with hazards on the shoulder the same way you treat a police car with lights flashing. Move over if you can, slow down significantly if you can't. Otherwise, you're breaking the law in 33 states. And finally, here's the most controversial change on this entire list, the one that's generating heated debates about fairness, privacy, and the proper role of government in traffic enforcement. Traffic violation fines are now income-based in 6 states, which means the same speeding violation costs wildly different amounts depending on how much money you make. In 2026, 6 states adopted a sliding scale for traffic fines based on the violator's income, importing a system that's been used in some European countries for years. California, Oregon, Washington, New York, Illinois, and Vermont are testing this approach. Here's how it works. If you make $30,000 a year, your speeding ticket might be $150. But if you make $300,000 a year, that exact same speeding violation in the exact same location at the exact same speed could cost you $1,500 or more. The amount you pay is calculated based on your most recent tax return, which means the government is cross-referencing traffic violations with IRS data. The stated reasoning is that flat-rate fines disproportionately hurt low-income people. A $200 ticket is financially devastating to someone living paycheck to paycheck, potentially forcing them to choose between paying the fine and buying groceries or making rent. But that same $200 ticket is barely noticeable to someone making $500,000 a year. They'll pay it without changing their behavior. The income-based system is supposed to make fines proportionally impactful across all income levels, creating equal deterrent effect. But it's also generating fierce opposition from people who argue that equal treatment under law means everyone pays the same fine for the same violation, and that tying fines to income is government overreach that punishes success. The privacy concerns are also significant. Do you really want the traffic court system accessing your tax returns every time you get a speeding ticket? This is social engineering through traffic enforcement. And whether you think it's fair or outrageous depends entirely on your perspective on equity versus equality. But regardless of what you think about the policy, if you live in one of these 6 states, you need to understand that your traffic violations just got potentially much more expensive if you're a high earner. So, there you have it, 10 driving laws that changed in January 2026, and the vast majority of American drivers have no idea these changes happened. Law number 3, the left lane passing law, is catching the most people by surprise, and the fines are substantial enough to hurt. Law number 2, the 24/7 school zone cameras, is generating the most revenue while hiding behind child safety rhetoric. And law number 10, the income-based fines, is the most controversial and the one that's going to generate court challenges and political debates for years. But here's what matters right now. Today, these laws are being enforced. Police officers are writing tickets. Cameras are recording violations. Cities and states are collecting millions of dollars in fines from drivers who had no idea the rules changed. And ignorance is not a legal defense. You can't tell a judge you didn't know about the law and expect the ticket to get dismissed. The responsibility is on you to know the current laws in your state, and that's nearly impossible when laws change frequently and public awareness campaigns are virtually non-existent. Here's your immediate action step. Take 5 minutes today to look up your specific state's rules on these 10 issues. Every state implements these laws slightly differently, and what applies in California might not apply in Texas. Your state DMV website has all this information, and most of it is written in plain English that you can actually understand. Knowledge is your best protection against tickets, points on your license, and insurance rates that skyrocket because of violations you could have easily avoided if you'd known the rules. Subscribe to this channel right now if you found this breakdown valuable, because new driving law updates drop constantly across different states, and I'm here to break them down for you before they hit your wallet. Drop a comment telling me which of these 10 laws you think is most unfair or which one you didn't know about, because this community needs to share information and hold lawmakers accountable when laws seem designed more to generate revenue than to actually improve safety. And hit that like button if you want more content that cuts through the nonsense and gives you practical information you can actually use. Don't be the driver who learns about a law change from a police officer handing you a ticket. Be the driver who's informed, prepared, and ahead of the curve. These laws are real. The enforcement is active, and your wallet is the target.